Welcome everyone to another Truth Talks. Truth Talks is with TRHT, which is Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation Kalamazoo. I am your host, Ed Genesis, and on the tech support we have Emily Olivares. And today I'm excited to we're talking about Women's History Month. And before I even do the touchstones, I want to shut up and have y'all do your introductions, please, because I'm super excited. And then we can do the touchstones, if y'all don't mind. So, starting with my wife, the Vice Mayor, because I would be wrong if I didn't, Vice Mayor Patrice Griffin, and then if you can popcorn it to someone after you, and we can get the conversation going. You're on mute.
Oh my gosh, isn't that the phrase? You're on mute. We've been doing this for over a year. I ought to know better. Okay, look, y'all, give me grace. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patrice Griffin. I'm a housing advocate and also currently serving as the Vice Mayor of the City of Kalamazoo. So happy to be here and be in this conversation with these amazing women, as well as you, Ed. And I'm going to pass it to first on my screen, and that is Attorney Jessica Glenn.
Hello. Likewise, very happy to be here. And before we went live, we were talking about what a fangirl each of us is of this group. Super, super privileged to be here. And I am the Senior Director of Law and Policy at the YWCA, a human rights attorney at my core, and really excited to talk to you all today.
Hi, everyone. Elena Mireles Hill, she, her, ella pronouns, and my formal role is Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at the Kalamazoo Community Foundation, also a racial healing practitioner with TRHT, and really committed to community building, healing, culture building, and advocacy with community, and really excited to be with all of these powerful women. So.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stacey Ledbetter. I am retired from the earned rank of captain from a career in public safety, law enforcement, and currently the Chief Executive Officer of Black and Blue Networking and Consulting, LLC, and a proud member of the leadership team of Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation Kalamazoo. Thank you.
Thank y'all all very, very much. Y'all left it out. Y'all didn't do a lot of boasting and a lot of that's cool. I'm gonna get it out of y'all though, because I've learned some awesome things. So I want to hear some of that the extras that y'all do as well, because it pushes and builds power. I'm gonna go into the touchstones. They might be. Okay, if not, I'm gonna just read them. Okay, the touchstones are: be 100% present, extending and presuming welcome, speak your truth, always by invitation, listen deeply, maintain confidentiality. And even though as retired Captain Stacey Ledbetter lifted up, this is not a private conversation. What we do ask is that we don't take things that we hear from other people on the panel and repeat their conversation, because we use I statements, which is another touchstone. No language of the soul is privilege over any other language of the soul. Value feeling as much as knowing. No fixing, no saving, no advising. Identify assumptions and suspend judgment. Respect and learn from silence. When things get difficult, turn to wonder and trust the healing process, your own heart and the hearts of others. And I did say the I statements. I forgot that's the revised list, but we do use I statements and not speak for others. So that is where that came from. With no further ado, this is exciting for me because I was raised by strong Black women who kept me in line. helped me get dressed for the day, how to feed myself and everything else. So I'm excited to just sit back and hear from you all and what you have to say. And I get to cheat a little bit because for those who don't know, retired Captain Stacey Ledbetter is actually the co-creator of Truth Talks. Her and I had a conversation of how can we build power in the community and have something to where like it was real. And this is what we came up with. And she's actually responsible for capitalizing the T, the R, the H, and the T in Truth Talks as well. I just told Gabe that last week, so she has that creative, artistic point too. And with no further ado, before going into the actual agenda question, my question that I would like to ask of all of you is, why is this an important conversation? And we can start with retired Captain Stacey Ledbetter.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for those kudos and that love. And it was just a great opportunity to talk to the creative mind. And we come up with this concept together. So why is this an important conversation? We're talking about Women's History Month, women's empowerment in general, because it is what it is. Just to be blunt, just to be short, just to be concise, lifting and celebrating what women do, not only in this community, but the effects can be also statewide, national, and even worldwide, which we see sometimes. So it's an opportunity. And I just appreciate, in terms of even this situation, male hosted, but you acknowledging the importance and thought high enough of it to be even a topic to be included. So it is important simply because it is. Thank you.
I like that, simply because it is. That doesn't need. Yeah, I like that. Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Patrice Griffin, same question.
Just to follow up with what Captain said, all of what she said, and representation matters. And so I think it's important to lift up and see women across the board, across, many different backgrounds, and just hear from us and what our experiences are. And because there's that little girl out there, we were all that little girl out there. And so I just think that that's amazing. It's important. It's beautiful that we have this month, but every day, women contribute and are beautiful, but we'll take this month and rock with it.
Thank you for that. I like that. I like how you said to take the month and rock with it, because it's like, that's how we were just talking about Black History Month and just owning that. And some people say, well, it's the shortest month of the year. And you got Valentine's Day, you got, and it's like, we don't look at it like that. We rocking with this, the whole 28 days, leap year, or whatever else, and we keep it going 365 days of the year. However, for that time, because that's what we're doing, we're definitely on that. Jessica, same question, please.
And you're more gracious than I am, because I think I have, a different reaction to the fact that we still just have a month, but we center our learning about history still, right, outside of certain social justice circles, led by, our wonderful Captain Stacey Ledbetter and TRHT and other efforts around the country. But still, largely the history we focus on is that was written by a very specific and narrow segment of our society. And as we get into this conversation, I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit more, but whose rights have been centered, whose history has been centered or rewritten. And so, I'm grateful we have a month, I guess, but like Black History Month, we need to get the history right. And so I'm grateful for this conversation and the ability to gather to talk about how we need to rewrite history, how we need to start teaching history to our children, so we don't need to correct that as adults. and we can get at the root of some of the issues I'm sure we'll touch upon. But as with Black History Month and Women's History Month and all of the various histories that have been rewritten or written out of our collective history, we've got some work to do. So I'm grateful to be invited and participate and talk a little bit about what maybe that looks like moving forward.
Absolutely. And a correction, Attorney Glenn, I didn't mean any disrespect, just calling you by your first name like that on the just putting you out there on blast. So Attorney Glenn, and forgive me. And please, Elena, the same. And now we work together in the same rooms, and I ain't never known no other names. So I'm respectful and humble. Yeah, and so I'm cool, right?
Talking to me?
Yes.
Yeah, Elena.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
you're great.
yeah, just
You're great.
okay.
You're great. Thanks for asking.
Let me know.
Pull up.
Okay.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah, I appreciate all the comments thus far. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm learning our history and recognizing how women have not been centered necessarily in our history has definitely created the reality that we have now. And I also think this is a really powerful moment for women in our history, and rewriting history and recreating history, and demonstrating our power as a collective that has always been there, of our ancestors and the women who have birthed us, and many generations that have come before us. And it's been really powerful to see how women have been leading in this moment at the local, state, and national levels, and how we're reimagining what leadership can look like in our communities, and women really claiming their power that has been denied us for too long. And so I think, yeah, this conversation is important in this month, and in to the point of the other my fellow women on the panel, is that it's important all throughout the year. And so we should revisit it in so many months as well, again, because it's happening every day, I think, in our communities, and yet I think it's just a moment for us to pause even more so and to speak about it.
I think absolutely what you said, and then you lifted up ancestors, and you just really in school they have a patriarch type of way of teaching things throughout. So you see the different leaders. Well, this is this person, and this is this person, and you learn it. And then you step back and you get the real history, as Attorney Glenn lifted up, and you start finding out, like, wow, that wasn't a man at all during that time. Or when this man did that, one of the things that I want to lift up that I feel like is important about this conversation is I'm an organizer on criminal justice reform. And let me say I'm lead organizer now on criminal justice reform, and take my roses while I'm here, because I work for that. But a Black woman brought me into this space, and her name is Alicia, and she thought that it was important that I learn what was being done and not just move in the community and pass out pizza and popsicles. She said, that's commendable, but do you know what's being done to you, and that you can fight and say something back? And that was powerful, to bring a man into the space. And at that time, and Patrice remembers, Vice Mayor Patrice remembers, that at Michigan United, there were no men at that time. And then we got Alex, who works on legal services. And I was wowed at how many women were leading and pushing the work, But then there was another side that said, well, why don't you hear about this like that? Or like, why, like what's going on? And so the first question on the agenda, because you all have it, it says, what's the work? What is the work that you are leading and you want to lift up, and why? And we ask that because we know the work that you all are doing. Like Emily and I, like this was a strategic question. And so that's why I said I was going to get y'all to like boast a little bit more. And it's not bragging, because it's not surface level. This is boasting because you deserve to be lifted up, and the work that you all do deserves to be lifted up. I'm gonna shut up and please reintroduce yourselves, please, and the work that you are leading, and the work that you want to lift up, because people, they're watching now and they want to know how can they help and how can they sign up, and we will use this as part of that platform as well. And start creating our own narratives. Or I don't mean to say we, as I'm just respectfully saying we as in community. So Vice Mayor Patrice Griffin, if you can lift up what you're working on, and this time to silence me a little bit more, I don't need to talk. You call the next person after you're done, and you all call on one another, and I want to listen and learn, as we all should.
Okay, thank you. So some of the work that I have been leading, even though I have interest in overall the improvements for those who have had generally been marginalized. My self-interest is in housing. And so that came from personal housing crisis, looking around and saying, why are we all in this? Why is our situation like this? And what can we do to make it better? And so I, along with Isaac and TRHT, worked very hard to get an ordinance passed, which it was September 8th of 2020, that removed barriers, started to remove barriers, as well as have a strong enforcement component, which created a civil rights board, of which one of our amazing panelists, Attorney Jessica Glenn, is on. And so that's really been what has taken up the majority of my time. And moving forward, we are working with the other municipalities, with the township, with the city of Portage, and with other areas to pass similar laws in their communities as well. Even though I serve as the vice mayor of the city, my interest is in my entire community. And the way the lines are in Kalamazoo, you can drive up one street and be technically in another municipality. And so should that mean your situations change? No, you should have the same rights, the same choices, the same options wherever. So that's one of the big things that I have going on right now. And, quite honestly, my mind is all over the place. So I would probably circle back to and be able to answer more, but that's primarily what my focus has been improving our conditions for families and with respect to housing. Oh, okay. And next, I will go to Elena.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll lift up the work that I've been doing in the with Latina leaders in the community, ellas, and I'll give a little context for why I helped initiate this body of work. So I came to Kalamazoo over 8 years ago, and immediately, coming into community, I was asking questions of where are the leaders that look like me in community? Why aren't they at leadership tables? Why don't we have any representation? Knowing that we have a growing Latinx community here in Kalamazoo, and I didn't get a lot of great answers for that question, and it was just really clear to me early on that my community was being largely overlooked in this, in Kalamazoo County, and didn't have a lot of representation or advocacy. And yet a lot of decisions that were being made for our community were by people, by individuals that didn't look like us, had no idea what the issues that we're facing in our community. And so, various different ways of trying to learn what was going on. But in 2018, a group of Latinas, we started this work of ELLAS to say we really want to be able to elevate Latina leaders in our community to be at these leadership tables, to be advocates for our community, to show that, we have powerful people in our community that can speak for ourselves, and that we do have real needs in our community that and individuals that need, and families that need support. And so in 2019, we launched a leadership program with 25 Latinas in the area, and that formally went through this program. And since then, we have been able to see some great progress of what has happened as a result of just elevating these women in community, and saying, we're here, we're not going anywhere. And our voices and our advocacy and the space that we're able to take in community it matters. And so we've seen women, be assigned to various more task forces and committees as a result of this group. One of them sits on the Civil Rights Board. One of my AA sisters sits on that board. And again, when you have that voice at that table, you're able to speak to issues around immigration, issues around language access for our community, and all the other social determinants of health, of how they intersect for our community. And so we've seen various ways that women have been invited to boards and task force as a result. We have seen the way that these women have served as bridge builders in various different spaces, and even have helped influence more advocacy for our Latinx community, even just within ourselves and our connectedness. So an example would be when COVID hit, because of the network of the EAS women, we all worked together to be able to get the 211 Spanish line launched immediately, that had not been present before, to be able to respond to community, and also helped to get resources into to El Concilio to be able to start the Mi Gente Fund that was able to help fund undocumented individuals that were not getting the stimulus checks. And so, but that network and that connectedness and those relationships of trust matter, right? When we're trying to move forward, work for community. And then on an individual level, I think it's helped women really see their own power and their own skills. And so we've seen over almost half of the women that have either transitioned their jobs or gotten promoted as a result of them being, going through the program and really recognizing what they had to offer, and being able to live into their power in their professional spaces as well. So we have been really grateful for what has happened. I feel like we're only at the beginning of that work. But again, I think to what Vice Mayor Patrice said earlier, representation matters. And I think that's what we're really trying to advance in that space.
Who would you like to call on next?
I know, I'm always bad at that. Jessica.
Yeah, self-promotion's hard. So I moved to Michigan 6 years ago now, when my son was 3 months old, because my husband was offered a position at Kalamazoo College, and is a professor there. And I have represented largely immigrant victims of crimes and refugees, asylees, for the vast majority of my career, and previously was the managing attorney of an anti-trafficking program in New York City. And so when we were in graduate school or in law school, respectively, I told my husband I would go to either coast because it's hard to get an academic job. And he applied to Kalamazoo College without telling me. and didn't tell me until he got an interview, and was and this is a point of contention in our marriage, so I'm sorry to air our marital stuff publicly. But it has been exactly where I'm supposed to be. And so when I came to Kalamazoo, I did not know what I was going to do. I thought I was actually going to go back and get a PhD doing some research in research and evaluation. I've always really enjoyed research and probably would have been fine as an academic, but I get in my own way, and I care. I get into kind of the fight of it in terms of the social justice work, and so I rang up the YWCA and offered to take a couple of pro bono cases, and what was supposed to be a pro bono case ended up becoming a legal department, and a separate human trafficking program. And so we created the first comprehensive program for human trafficking survivors in the state of Michigan. And we are the only legal services program that focuses specifically on the intersections of race and gender in the law in the state. And so we are now a staff of about 12, and the vast majority of our docket is representing women of color, primarily Black women, who are victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, human trafficking, and enforcing their rights under the law. And so the Michigan statute for crime victims' rights was passed in the 1980s and hasn't been revised since in a meaningful way. Certainly since the real invention of the internet. And there are really significant privacy concerns for victims of crimes in our state. When a case is charged, if you are an adult over the age of 18, your name and all of your publicly identified, or all of your information, including your home address, your telephone number, your workplace, your employer, your work address, all of that is a public record and is part of the charging documents, and is available for anyone to see, including the media. And so you're forever tied to your perpetrator and this crime committed against you into perpetuity, right? Now with the internet in the way that we know it. And so a large part of my work in the last couple of years has been around amending the Crime Victim Rights Act for the state, and entering notices of appearance on behalf of victims in criminal matters and criminal actions against their perpetrators. And so that's one small segment, but lifting up these gaps that are largely still gender-based, right? We talk about domestic violence and we talk about sexual assault in our country. We still don't really regard that as a gender-based crime. You do if you step out of the U.S. I think the global international legal community recognizes rape and domestic violence as a crime primarily as one that is gender-based and exists largely because of our patriarchal system and our incredibly racist system of in history, but that is it. And when we talk about the prevalence of domestic violence in our community, over 40% of all calls to law enforcement, and I mean, Captain Ledbetter, maybe you can, you'd be better to speak to this, but 40% are usually domestic incident calls, and that's not unique to our community. That is across the board as a nation. And it is my position that if we had another crime that constituted that large of a portion of all crimes committed, but it wasn't committed primarily against women and children, it would matter in a much more significant way. And we'd be calling it a crisis, right? And we would be diverting resources to that crisis in a much more meaningful way. But we don't. And so when we talk about Women's History Month, and we talk about violence against women, we are still very much at the beginning stages of how to really address this crime. But I think the first thing that we must do as a community is realize the prevalence and really call it for what it is, right? This is gender-based violence. And it does happen to men too, and it happens to boys, but it is because, right? It is because of the power imbalance in our society. And it is because, in large part, women still very much struggle in being believed when they tell people what happened to them. And so, so that is what we have tried to craft our department around, and lifting up some of the policy changes that have to happen, whether that is through impact litigation or direct representation of victims, or policy advocacy, and I would be remiss too if I didn't lift up the disproportionate amount of domestic violence and sexual assault against Black women. And that confluence and that history of oppression, with the criminal justice system and based on their gender, right? That intersectionality really continues to rob people and women and Black women of their rights and their voice in our community. How the cases are investigated, how they are regarded by prosecutors in considering the veracity of the statement or the credibility of the witness. And then, of course, as they make their way through trial and the jury pools that then are assembled to decide the outcome of these cases. But we have real work to do, and I'm proud of what I've helped create at the Y and in this community, and I look forward to working with folks to really lift up some of the ways that we continue to really rob women of their voice here. So Captain Ledbetter, pass it off to you.
Thank you, ma'am. And yes, I absolutely concur with you with everything you said. And you all, when I started my career here in Kalamazoo in 1991, the laws and the support aren't what they are today. The YWCA had not been brought into the picture that time in terms of support and counseling and shelter, et cetera. And so we would respond to calls, which are still frequent, obviously to this day, as you all just heard. And we would just try to break it up, try to calm people down and be on our way, as opposed to looking into it, separating the parties. Under the circumstances, we had to, remove by way of arrest for protective purposes, just really looking into the story. So just grateful for what you do and what the YWCA does just as well. So in terms of me, I'll start with my company name that I shared, Black and Blue Networking and Consulting. Is very literal to me. Black woman, the predominance in that title, who I am in this world. And the blue is what I did in terms of a chosen profession. And I formalized the company in 2017, the year that I retired. And it was just a beautiful, divine segue into continuing the work of bridging the gap between that Black and Blue in particular, but really the community as a whole. I have a strong belief in diversity. I also do implicit bias and cultural awareness trainings, those types of things. And just because I am who I am, my family, friends, loved ones, and just many people in society, the issues are real. And those gaps still have to be filled. So even my logo is a combination. It has the badge on there. It has the blue side. It has the black side. It has a bridge. It has the sun. It's all shaped in a heart, just for the possibilities and for the work that still needs to be done. And, just what we see in the horizon. So I'm just very truly committed to that in terms of my life's journey. Even though I'm retired from the profession, the issues are still what they are. And I know I don't have to explain those because we're all living and seeing what's going on across the country. And so that collaboration with TRHT has been a blessing just as well, because I have the opportunity to be invited, and shout out to Shalana Lewis, who I met before I retired, and her coming to some events that I created while at the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, again, bringing, and I was very, very intentional and specific then about bringing Black men into the space so they could meet new officers and have conversations and learn how to be respectful, if you will, in the community. These officers I'm talking about that they were about to serve, and hear and have conversations and meals with people who were at the table spending their time. They weren't getting paid to be there, but to build positive relationships. And so I'm still committed to that. So through TRHT, with being a racial healing practitioner and trainer, that's what it's about. Making connections, building relationships, having, for what many people are difficult conversations. Because again, all of us in here, and you all gave some beautiful shares already, but all of us, no matter who we are, have our own stories and experiences. And you may feel some type of way when I tell mine, but guess what? Can't take it away. It's mine. And that same thing goes for everybody else. So helping to cultivate those conversations in a respectful place and encouraging people to go on and do those things with other people. So that, in addition with being the lead of the law design team, where it's a collaboration of just community members committed to their causes. And so even the wonderful people in this space being a part of that, but where we make the connection with the criminal justice system side is through what we do. Because in this Ed Genesis is what you asked, with people saying, well, what can they do, how they can be involved with what we launched through the team. All Pact, which is actually a Michigan Department of Civil Rights initiative. And shout out to Gwen Moffitt, who's on our team, who works for Michigan Department of Civil Rights and help us launch here. But there is a Facebook page called Kalamazoo County All Pact. Kalamazoo County All Pact, that people can connect with and see our upcoming events, et cetera, et cetera. But when we talk about the system, people get stuck in the zone sometimes with policing only. But when we talk about the issues that we confront in TRHT in that realm, and we've been catapulted, if you will, just because of the last year's events that were going on in addition to the pandemic. But criminal justice system being not only police, but the court system and the corrections system. So all of those combined, and it's about what? Education, accountability, transparency, working towards all of those things, which I contend is possible. And we're going to continue to do that and bridge gaps. And there's no promise that there won't be discomfort. It's something that has to be done, but it's done with, even though intent is different from impact, we are moving forward with the desire and with the positive heart and intention of doing the right thing, so everybody has an equitable existence. And the last thing that I'll mention, I just wanted to acknowledge, where I was, acknowledge just in terms of me standing on shoulders. I, had the opportunity to just, people, hey, Captain, first Black female, this, that, and the other. But Stacey Randolph Ledbetter, in and of herself, like, it wasn't just me. It wouldn't have been possible with anything that I just did, because I would have been the chief if it was that simple. So let's just be real about that. So it took shoulders along the way. And so the Kalamazoo Police Department was established in the late 1800s. I hired on in 1991. When I walked out the door in 2017, I was still only the fourth Black female to actually retire from the department, and the fourth Black female ever hired on, period. And so for those of you who know it as public safety today, that collaboration happened in 1982, which is the combination of policing, firefighting, and medical first response. So I did all of those. Fighter, I was commander in that regard, and also the medical first response. So shout out to the women who came before me, and and just pave that way for it to even be a thought. Just that factual of people, young people, Vice Mayor mentioned, just little girls watching, people seeing what they can be. And I was blessed one time with a young lady, young Black female, young adult now, who told me she became interested in law enforcement because I came and read to her class. And this is, I believe, National Reading Month just as well. So shout out to that just as well in terms of literacy, reading, and all of that stuff. And she said when she saw me, she was just like, wow, I want to do that. I want a uniform just like hers. I want that belt just like hers. I even want that bun. I still got it today, y'all. She was like, I want a bun just like her. I want everything. And so that was just so beautiful and touching to me because I was her. I mean, she saw the possibility of something that she could do. And that just meant the world to me. And that's, I'm a person of faith. And so that's daily my prayer that I can reach out, touch, and affect, even if it's just one person in a positive way in terms of education or love or outreach or support or encouragement somewhere, somehow. And so in this space, as we do that and elevate for women, just wanted to throw that out there too, but also give thanks to those women who came before me, Barb Rivers, Vanessa Marzette, Latanya Buggs, and then it was me. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Captain. Thank you all. But I specifically said Captain on that last one because you set it up for the next place that we're going, actually, which is the on the agenda. We're going to talk about how do you see points of oppression and privilege, and there's a couple other things with that, but I'm stopping for 1 minute because I want to say a couple different things. So early on, I said it, in a laughing type of way, that I was raised by primarily Black women, strong Black women, that I watched, like, I mean, just make a way, like for real, make a way. They shouldn't have had to make a way. And now that I know what that is, and that there were so many barriers in the way that my mother had to make a way, that's not cool. So that leads me to the other part, which was I found out when I talked about history, and you hear forefathers and the colonizers and the settlers, the early people that did their murdering and all that stuff that they did. And it's always uplifting something. It's Christopher Columbus Day every year, and it's like, what are you perpetuating? And then I found out that the Constitution has like 52 mentions of men, which they're referencing white men, and there's no reference of women whatsoever. And then, of course, what they thought about, any indigenous people or any people of color was like not fit into the picture. And so fast forward, we just did a talk on toxic masculinity last week. And there's a lot of things that came up and we did it about men. We didn't even go into the depths of how that shows up in relationships. We just talked about, where are we learning this from? Why do we teach it to our sons? What's the need to be the alpha male? And that takes me back to talking to Attorney Glenn during this summer, and why we had the Truth Talks on violence. So there's a toxic masculinity that's white men set a long time ago that says, if I want it, I'll just take it. And if you appear to be weaker than me, and so I myself may not have thought I was weaker, and so they have to mentally break me down and make me feel like I'm inferior in order to be susceptible to their attacks. This is what I found out about me. So when I think about women, and I think about the talks that I had with Attorney Glenn, and there's one group in the city besides the youth, because the youth don't stand a chance here either, honestly. The age of reason is 7 years old. The juvenile home has a studio, t-shirt printing, nice gym, and a whole bunch of other things that they don't have access to unless they're incarcerated, but that's another thing. But the most unprotected group of people in the city are the ones doing the most work and left to lead and hold it down when the police come and lock me up or bust my head or profile me and I'm going through my own trauma. There's a woman that's left to pick up the pieces or to hold it all together. And what is oppression? How does that show up? What is that looking like? That's on the agenda, but I added the other part because I see it show up in a way that's like, in order for me to attack, I have to see you as less than. How does that show up in the work continuously in 2021, like right now? Why did we just hear those alarming statistics from Attorney Glenn when you all are the ones leading the work in the city? Like, how is that possible? And that's a real question. Starting with you, Attorney Glenn, please.
Yeah, I don't know. So yes, the oppression of people who have largely not mattered, right, under our laws, and still, for all intents and purposes, continue to not matter, and who are disenfranchised in such significant ways across the board, by our legal system, our financial system, by our access to money, right? And equity, like financial equity, but also equity, is super real. And the question that was on the prompt for the agenda was, how do you recognize that within your work and your place with other women? And personally, I really try to center my and acknowledge in all of the work that I'm doing the fact that I am a middle-class white woman who has a very different experience navigating the world, and really taking that into consideration when I offer advice and counsel to my clients, but also my colleagues and my staff, and forging case management plans with our clients who are experiencing generational poverty and oppression, and talking about like what it is really going to take to achieve some sense of safety in their lives. And I think we would be in a very different place within the women's rights movement if we had had that conversation, right? Of like, what is the experience though of all women, than we do today. And if we have, and I think we're getting there within the women's rights movement and the feminist movement, right? But it has taken our whole history to get here. And, our experience in providing services at the Y is one where I've tried to hire a diverse staff who can speak to that. And when a client walks into our office, they don't fear that they're not going to be seen or heard, and that their issue is really going to be addressed in a comprehensive way where their interest is centered. Because the reality is, our clients still get asked, like, did you call the police when this happened? And instead, the conversation really has to be, is it safe for you to call the police? And is the criminal justice response what you actually want to engage in, right? And this is kind of what we had a conversation about over the summer, Ed, right? Like what our clients fundamentally want, and I think what a lot of survivors of violence want, is fundamentally to be safe, right? So institutions or systems to be in a position where they can actually help them reach safety and believe them. Maybe first is believe them, listen to them and believe what they are saying, and then center that, right? If we listen to people and ask them not just what you need, because we do lots of these focus groups and we're very fond of like, we should just ask people, but like then listen to them and act on that, right? Instead of purporting to be the experts on their lives. And so a lot of what I think we need to do in addressing oppression and privilege is let us please center finally the experiences of people who have been only on the margins, and bring them and center them in this conversation about what they need, and not run with it. And I'm fond of saying too, we're not going to prosecute our way out of domestic violence or sexual assault or human trafficking. We're not going to criminalize our way out of it. And as a society, that's where we go, right? We're always, let's make this another degree higher. Let's increase the penalty for doing this. If it were as simple as that, I think we would have seen far more impact with the implementation of some of the laws. They're important. And when someone does offend that, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a consequence because there has to be, but what the victim wants has to be centered, and we're not there. And so this is where I go back to the Crime Victim Rights Act and the important rights that we enumerated in that and yet do not lift up. So the right to dignity and privacy, the right to confer with prosecution, the right to be heard, right, in the court. If we centered that, and if we asked the victim, what do you need to be safe? What do you need to be made whole? What do you need in terms of justice? We would have a very different system. And I think the outcomes would look a lot different. I think you'd see a decrease in our prison population. And this isn't just for domestic violence. I think it's across the board and kind of gets into that conversation of restorative justice. So, but that's a long-winded way of saying we need to really start centering the voices of people we haven't listened to for a very long time.
I appreciate you saying that. And now I'm finna go across the hall, same building, same type of oppression that I've witnessed as a man now that I'm learning. So it just showed up a little different. So when a white man can pick a white woman and say that this is his darling, that's already got little remnants of toxicity with that, because you're like, is this your darling or is this a colleague? And it was supposed to be a colleague. And says, I think she would fit the role better than this black woman who has served and is now a captain. She would fit the role because she has the academics and the she never did any time in the streets, but she could be the captain of police for the city of Kalamazoo and get called a darling and was picked by a white man. That shows up as violence. That shows up as oppression. That shows up as the minute you said something like that, then I want to check what mind frame you're coming from to say, and this is a quote that I read, and it just looked good for aesthetic reasons to say this is the first time we've had a woman in this position. And what looks like you're breaking down barriers or what looks like you're tearing down walls showed up as unsafe, because who do you talk to? Who? And I'm not speaking for you, retired Captain Stacey Ledbetter, but I was outraged, and that showed up to me as oppression in the city. And I said, well, what are we doing? I remember going to my social media, which is all I thought I could do. And Captain remembers, and Vice Mayor Patrice probably too. I got phone calls before the post was up 5 minutes. I got 3 different phone calls asking me to take it down because I wasn't supposed to say that I didn't think it was cool. Just and not pitting excuse me, one against each other, but that's why the second half of that question on that agenda was talking about, do other women recognize when they too are playing into, because that man did that, but and not throwing Chief Carrie Ann under the bus, a former Chief Carrie Ann Thomas under the bus. She's not here to speak for herself, but anybody to play party to further oppressing is just not cool. And so I wanted to go across the hall and retired Captain Stacey Ledbetter. Sometimes oppression comes differently. It's not just domestic violence. It's not just us causing physical harm, but there's another type of harm that can make women in our community feel unsafe. And yeah, that's how I felt about. I didn't mean to set that all the way up. I just really, that came up, and yeah, that's it.
You're speaking your truth, and the tangent that I'll go on with that, just looking at oppression, so everybody's clear on that specifically, which is the prolonged, cruel, or unjust treatment or control. That's that part right there. And then when you think about things that are systemic, and there's other words that tail on the end of that, i.e., systemic racism, et cetera, the isms with the sexism and this, that, and the other. And it's still situations where, just landing on systemic racism just for a minute, where people in leadership still don't believe that that's a thing. And so again, I just go back to the education and the conversation and even community. Again, shout out to our vice mayor sitting here. When you got to your position by the voters, by we the people, representing groups and people understanding the power of their vote, the power of being involved, talking about Attorney Glenn being on that committee, et cetera. So community being involved, stepping up, asking questions, and just being involved with all of these entities that their tax dollars are funding, and certain expectations come about with that. So thinking about systemic, just to be clear, that refers to something that is spread throughout, affecting a group or system, such as an economy, a market, or society as a whole. And sometimes when we have beliefs, sometimes we can't even land on where we got them from. And I'll give you all a quick example, and you can just tell me right now, those of us in the space or whoever's commenting on the chat, when you hear the phrase all-American girl, what does she look like? Like, where, as far as what I'm not talking about what you may believe in your heart and what it should be. What have we been taught or socialized to think that woman or that girl looks like?
Blonde hair, blue eyes.
Where'd you get that from?
And skinny.
Okay, so you have something specific. I can't even think of, like, for me to know and agree with you where it even came from. Any of you ladies, my colleagues on this panel, do you know? Because I know you agree with what Ed Genesis said, but do you know where it came from in your life in terms of your awareness? Exactly. Y'all answering me
It's just
by
all ever
I mean,
present. Mhm.
it's just like
Every,
white supremacy. We were
every
swimming in it.
movie, yes.
But you even say, when you say All American Girl, I think about those American Girl dolls, and seeing those put out there. I know also, but it's really part of our greater socialization. Yeah.
Exactly. And shout out to American Girl. They're doing better. And I know they have diverse options now and that type of thing. So I just say all of that to say, even taking it on back, you all, to the founding of our country. So that room where the quote unquote founding fathers were, and the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and what that picture looked like and who was in the room, even though they had some general statements as they advanced to the Constitution, and what we still go back by today, because it's all encompassing if it's applied correctly. But when it was generated, who was really being talked about and embraced? And if you look at the historical line, when any inclusivity came about, it took time, it took change, it took push, it took advocacy, it took, at Genesis, the organizing you still do today. And so we're still working toward that mark and being clear. Should it be a thing that somebody gets something just because of what they look like, whatever? Of course not. Of course not. So it still goes by just even the recruitment, the opportunity, the mere thought of, because as we talk about women, and then the chosen field that I had, that oppression is a real thing in terms of a lot of people, men in particular, but not only men. So I won't lock that in at 100%, to think women shouldn't even be doing it. Period. So there's just all types of thoughts and that type of thing out there. And just like we're doing today, and people just speaking their truth, and we're just keeping it open and alive with having that conversation and continuing to ask questions and expect accountability when different things happen, and inquiring on how they happen. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you brought it, and I appreciate that. Because I definitely wasn't trying to speak for you when I was saying the things that I've witnessed. I'm just learning, and what I didn't know what equity was once upon a time at all, and I'm learning so many different things, and I'm just like, wow, and I'm blown away the more I do, because it's like, that's another trap, that's another obstacle, that's another barrier, it's shameful, but it's real. Elena, the same thing then. How have you seen oppression and different things show up, whether work field or otherwise, that's been like a barrier?
Yeah, I have a few different thoughts, but I think connected to what we've been talking about, just because we're women doesn't mean that we can't also uphold and perpetuate patriarchy. We've been socialized in it. It's what we've known has been the way of how society works. And so we very much can reinforce it, just like people of color can reinforce institutional and systemic racism, because that's part of our survival, right? And so, and we saw it with, the election, the previous election, that white women could have changed the vote, but because they were sold so much on their own oppression, and many times it was often their husbands and how they voted, that they felt that they needed to vote with their husbands, that they couldn't imagine something different, because they could only, literally there was women that said, I could only imagine a man as a president. They voted against their own interest and not voting for a woman because they could only imagine as a man, because that was like the way we've been socialized under our oppression. So absolutely, we can uphold it and perpetuate it, again, out of what we've known, and the goal is, if when we know better, we do better. But we've been in it for so long, and it's hard to imagine something different. I think in this, and so I think it leads to the situations like what you're talking about, Ed, where we're going to call a woman out who's in leadership in a certain way, hold her to a different standard than we would for a man in a similar position, because again, that part of that bias that plays out for how we also play into the system. I think we've always had a sense of there's always challenges in any human relations. There's challenges. I think in our particular context right now of where we're at as a society, there's a sense of heightened tension in our communities. And I see like this, what you were talking about, Ed, earlier, about this idea of like not fully lifting one another up and seeing each other as competition. And it's like amplified right now. I see it happening a lot in various communities. And I even see us as women doing it to each other a lot. I mean, if I could tell you all the conflicts I'm seeing between women in different spaces, it's like, oh my gosh, because we're coming from this space of scarcity, of survival, of like, I need to have my own, like, we can't all have it together. As opposed to saying like, we're actually better when we all do better. We're better when women do better. We're better when people of color do better. We're better when our youth do better. And like, when we're all lifting each other up. And so when we talk about like what an equitable community for women looks like, is that multiracial face of the power of women, centered and lifted up. And we're all like each other's champions and promoters in community, and allowing all of us to, live in our power, I think. And yet, we know that there's still huge discrepancies between women of color and white women, so like, to the white women make, I think 79 cents to the dollar to men. But on that whole spectrum, Black women make 66 cents to the dollar to men, and Latinas are at the bottom with 58%, or 58 cents to the dollar to men. And so we see these divisions and discrepancies even amongst women, but to what I said, our ability to be able to say, like, we need to lift us all up together, because our own interest is wrapped up in that collective interest. So
I knew y'all was gonna bring it. Like, I'm taking notes. And then also there's a question that came in from YouTube, and I kind of, especially with what you just named and lifted up, Elaine, I want to ask I want to make sure I ask exactly how they did. I would like the panelists to talk about how they would want to be remembered. And I think that's kind of deep. Yeah. How would you like to be remembered? And Elaine, if you don't mind, I know you just got done, but it's literally, because there's more on the agenda, but based off some of the things that you had just said, I wanted to go to that question now.
It's a great question, and that's, it's it's deep. I often think about, one, I want to be remembered as living with integrity, that I'm always trying to err on doing the right thing, and honest and authentic with people, because I think that matters. Like, when you put goodness into the world and you live in truth and ethically and all that, like, I just think it comes back to you. And thinking about the women who shaped me, my grandmothers, Maria Mireles, Maria Luisa Garza, like, honest women, honest, hard working women that fought for their families and sacrificed so much, working several jobs just to make ends meet and to provide better lives for their families, and crossing borders and doing really challenging work in the fields of California as migrant farm worker women. And so, these were honest, hardworking women, and so they're my examples of living with integrity and because your character is the one thing that you have to come back to, at the end of the day, and what you can defend is, so I think that, and I think someone who helped advance relationship building, healing, and power building in community. I think those are things that are super important that I think are part of our living and advancement into something different of what we need in our world and society. And so those are things that I think about every day and trying to do, and will be doing, I think, for the rest of my life.
That's a dope answer. I think if we don't document our own narratives, then 5 years from now we'll be talking about they don't tell the right history and we don't know our history. So we have to document our own narratives. Retired Captain Stacey Ledbetter. I just found out Big Bro is the one that asked that question. I didn't know because Emily sends the questions to me. So I would like to know, how would you like to be remembered?
I appreciate it. Yeah, that sounded like him when I heard that. I'm like, okay. Because we had heard that recently. And even though we didn't answer with each other, I would go with thinking about Dr. Maya Angelou again. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And that's what I would want to come to mind when people that I've interacted with think about me. I would hope that I always cultivated a space where they felt welcome, where they felt respected, where they had their dignity intact. And of course, landing on just feeling loved and embraced in the space with what we were doing. I just tried my best to have people feel that way. What I love about TRHT was them incorporating or teaching us about that hierarchy of human value. And that has to be just torn down. And I just have a heart for meeting people where they are and letting them know you can roll with me for wherever I'm supposed to be on that, proverbial ladder, if you will. And then if there's other people, I wanted to give a shout out to my sister colleagues again, with just us being in this space and anybody we may be encouraging. One of the other bits of advice I've been given over the years is if you have a circle where you are the one who has it going on the most, then you need a new circle. Like you need to just keep expanding your circle. So always striving to do better, always having something to aspire to. And even with that, as I aspire to do more, to do better, I also believe in reaching back and bringing other folks along with me. I know we're better together, and I'll land on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Let's keep it moving. Attorney Glenn, how do you want to be remembered?
It's so hard to answer these questions, and especially with such an eloquent group of other women. But honestly, I think for me, it's if I'm remembered as making the lives of people around me easier, then it will have been a life well lived. And the people that I have surrounded myself with, and I'm thinking about your comment, Captain Ledbetter, and I have actually, I think, situated myself in a position where I try to be among the folks who really don't have anything, and lifting up and giving them a platform, right? And if I have, and this was my initial reticence actually in serving in the Civil Rights Board, I think there are people who are so much more critical to put in these spaces and to hear from them and what they need. But if I have lifted up folks in that way and given them a platform to speak, certainly instead of speaking for them, but made life easier for people around me, I think that's how I'd like to be remembered.
That was kind of poetic. I like that. That was like you should read that somewhere. I like that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you all for sharing. Vice Mayor Patrice Griffin, how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered for being the best version of me, and hopefully inspiring others to be the best versions of themselves. So often it's the next so and so, or be like this person, or these attributes. And it's taken me a while into my adulthood to just say, you know what, you are who you are for a reason, and you might not have what this person has or what that person has, but what you have is what you're supposed to have and what you're supposed to do with it. And when you're walking in your purpose, then all of those things make sense. And so if anyone may be in a position where they seem like they're bumping up against a wall, it could be because you're not utilizing your gifts the way you're supposed to, and you're just moving in a different direction than you should be. And so, yeah, that would be something I would like to be remembered for.
That's like the perfect segue, because Miss Wendy Fields just texted, and what I would like to know is if you're walking in your purpose, and this is going back to that toxicity, and the fact that we live in North America, capitalism and white. So Thanksgiving and Christopher Columbus, they closed the bank on Christopher Columbus Day, knowing that he didn't find it. So that's where we live. So if you're walking in your purpose, Ms. Wendy Fields wants to know what do you do for self-care? Because if you're walking in your purpose, but stress can be real and will show up in the workplace, especially as you identify inequities, just different things. The more you learn, the more you see it like all around you. How do you self-care? What do you do? Is a question from Miss Wendy Fields, who's president of the NAACP and just an awesome person. What do you do to self-care?
This is Patrice again. So, that's a heavy question. I'm a mother, and I don't even really know what self-care looked like since 2002. And that's just the reality of it. And then in this work, when you care about things the way you care about, you had asked a question before about how women are able to be doing so much of this work, yet so not acknowledged. And it's because we're not in the positions to make the decisions. That's why there's just one of a few, and Captain Ledbetter can name the people that came before her. And Attorney Glenn can start a program that didn't exist. And Elena can help create AS because there was nothing there. We're just not there like we need to be. And so it's hard to take those breaks when you know, if you have that fight in you, and you know that if you pause for a minute, that it feels like the work's not going to continue, especially if you're carrying something. And so self-care has been something that I have had to really be intentional about very recently, because the work is not a sprint, it's a marathon. People have been doing this for years. And even though some things, you find out about something new, it excites you, it gets you charged, and you're like, here we go. You have to take care of yourself. So for me, sometimes, like right now, I'm into Life After Death, which is the second book of The Coldest Winter Ever, which is hands down one of my favorite books. So I'm doing that right now. I like to listen to music. Ed and I, we get into our shows, and we will do that sometimes for self-care. But it's definitely something that we need to be intentional and focus on. And before I jump off, I just really want to say really quick to another point that you made, about how important it is for women to be in this work. The ordinance that we created and that was passed, that was led by women. And I have to say that you know, someone lifted up Shalana Lewis, the director of TRHT, but I have to lift up Dr. Charlay Davis, who is the executive director of Isaac. And so, like, hands down, this whole movement, and then you even got the leads of TRHT Housing Task Force, Executive Director Stephanie Hoffman of Open Doors and Toby Hannah Davies, who are, you know, you have even more women. And I'm not taking you out, Ed, because I know that we, at the very core of that, started that work. So I'm not taking that away, but I'm lifting that up and saying, even in our community, when we talk about folks who are houseless, it is primarily women with children who are in these crisis situations. And so what do you do when you know you don't have anywhere to live? It's hard to take those breaks, and you know there's other women out there. So I can imagine all of us on this panel have had way more sleepless nights than we needed to, have probably not rested like we needed to, and probably all needs to commit to taking a little bit more breaks. But the work is real. If anybody who's ever been in crisis, and the things that drive you to do what you do, it's hard to put that on pause. It's hard to turn that off. So I just wanted to make sure I lifted that up.
Thank you for that. And I just want to say thank you for including me, but I really didn't do anything but just unlock the gym. I knew where the gym was at. Y'all wanted to get a game going. You put that squad together. Y'all did that. I just had the keys to a gym. That was it. That was it. And I got out the way. Y'all kick butt with doing that. And thank you for that. The city is better for it. Retired Captain Stacey Ledbetter, what self-care, what does that look like?
I'm with the vice mayor on reading. Just peeking at my Kindle now, I definitely have Life After Death. I have The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee, which she's the daughter of Dr. Gail Christopher, who launched TRHT, and it's about what racism costs everyone and how we can prosper together. Michael Eric Dyson's Long Time Coming, My Grandmother's Hands, Reclaiming Community, just so many. So I love to learn. That helps me relax, because I definitely want to know what I'm talking about, and I like to share information with other people. And for me, I can feel when I'm stressed, like literally mine builds up in my neck and shoulders. And so just relaxing, stretching, getting massages when I have the opportunity, pedicures, just taking care of me. Priding myself on being an officer and a lady on my terms, in terms of keeping myself together and taking care of myself, that type of thing. And I'll land on laughter. Love to laugh, have fun, joke, do that with my family all the time. We always cutting up, teasing, joking, and that takes a lot of stress off things just as well. And so having people in my life like you, Miss Wendy, too, doesn't hurt a thing. The one who's connected to everybody. You've been a blessing. So thank you for asking that question just as well. Thank you.
Okay, let's keep it going. Elena, what does self-care look like?
Oh, it looks like a journey. It looks like a journey over my lifetime. Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you have, kids and you're trying to work full time and all that. But yeah, I think it's super important. Like it's so hard to love others and to love community when we don't love ourselves first, and don't prioritize ourselves in different spaces. And yet, the messages are that we shouldn't prioritize ourselves in any way. And so I do a lot of meditation, a lot of breathing, a lot of journaling. When it's nice, I like to walk and just get connected to nature and get into my body in that way. I've been really exploring a Qigong practice lately, which is a lot about like circulation and energy movement in my body. And it's been like a standing meditation in the mornings, which has been beautiful. And yeah, I definitely echo, surrounding myself with community and loved ones who I can laugh with and kind of disconnect sometimes from the work so that I can be more present when I come back into the work. But when I disconnect, I try to really disconnect as much as possible. It's not always easy, but like I really try to be present to what is in front of me. And play hard when I can. Like I'm going to work hard, but I can play hard too, to try to, again, balance it out and also remember my humanity, amid all of it. So.
I like that you said remembering humanity, because sometimes the work, like Vice Mayor Patrice lifted up, sometimes you could just, the work is so important, you forget that I didn't eat today. I didn't drink water, or like I've watched people just go. So thank you for lifting up that humanity part. Definitely. Attorney Glenn.
So I'm just going to go throw out there that I don't think self-care, especially for women, is even a possibility until we start really talking about community care. And there's been a lot written about this, especially since the start of the pandemic, that we were all burned out before, right? The pandemic started as women with all wearing all of these multiple hats and not having the support of government that is needed through affordable childcare, through affordable housing, through a living wage. And until we get to those things, not to say that I also really enjoy pedicures, and I can take an entire afternoon's worth of a bath, right? If I had that time ever in my life. But that deep burnout and exhaustion, and that goal goes, deep in my soul, really stems from all of the things we've been talking about and the systemic oppression, but all of these vast unmet needs, because these have been issues that don't matter to lawmakers. And so until we prioritize family care, so not just child care, but care of elders. I take care of my father, who is schizophrenic and in assisted living, and manage all of his affairs along with 2 small children, and our family and this work. And it is exhausting. And every woman I know is exhausted. And so these are the things that we need to lift up. And when we talk about housing rights and we talk about affordable wages, the people who are going to benefit the most are women. They are. And so I take, again, hopefully some solace in the work that we're all doing collectively is going to make the lives of women easier. But I don't know that I'll never feel tired in my entire life. And it's not an exhaustion that will ever be cured, by a good night's sleep and a soak with some Epsom salt. So sorry, I know that's a little pessimistic, but we've really got to focus on that community care piece.
That wasn't pessimistic. You reminded me of a quote. I don't even know if it's a quote, but Malcolm X said, my oppressor pulling the knife out of my back 2 inches is not the same as, completely pulling the knife out. So yeah, I would imagine it would be hard to self-care in a city that you see is sick and suffering. Yeah, that was a deep way of putting that. And put it back on the city and on community for us to stand together to say, what does being well or self-care look like? Is it just isolating ourselves from the community? Because if so, then we are indeed saying that the community, something's wrong with the community, that we need to get away from it in order to be, I should be able to go out my front door and get embraced in the community. And somebody should walk up and say, how you feeling today? Yeah, well, let's talk. Let's walk and talk. And that's not, I'm probably get on somebody's nerves, or probably in their way, or they probably hit the horns. I'm too much in the street and everybody's in a hustle and bustle. Thank you for lifting that up. Thank you for what you all lifted up for humanity, to recognize that, to know that community needs to heal, to mention that most mothers or women of color, Black women, probably never will feel like they get the chance to rest. And then also the taking the time to get the pedicures and the things like that, but then also knowing that that is to continue the marathon, because it's the, how do I want to say this? It is a marathon because it's a marathon. Not just it's not a sprint, it's a marathon, but I'm talking about next week, this won't be fixed type of thing. Like that type of marathon. Like something's wrong with people to where you can't say these type of realistic things and people say, oh, I think I'll just give up that extra that I have. And it's so much homelessness and ridiculousness. And it's just so, thank you all for continuing the marathon. Yeah, thank you all. And for having this important conversation. And because it's March, let's figure out a way to where we can keep something going. And next steps. Vice Mayor had to go and get on another call. We technically are 1 minute over right now, but if there's anything, any last words, anything, anywhere anybody could tap in, check into, definitely Truth, Racial Healing, Transformation. We will keep things going, but retired Captain Elena, Attorney Glenn, if there's anything you want to say, closing out, feel free, please. Yeah, Attorney Glenn.
I will just again put out there that I'm very grateful to have been invited to speak with such an amazing panel, and also to just bear witness to the amazing work that was done through this the passing of this ordinance at the local level, and the power of organizing really cannot be understated or overstated. I think that I think we've got a lot to do, but I think we have engagement from the community in a way that we have really never seen before, and to see new people organizing in the community, particularly on the heels of George Floyd's murder, and some of the young people who came out this summer just gives me so much hope that we're going to continue to see real change. And so, yeah, thanks for the organizing work you do, Ed, and everybody out there. Keep at it. Keep at it. Thanks.
Thank you. Elena.
Yeah, I think for any women out there watching, any little girls see it, no, you're more powerful than you know. And one of the greatest gifts you can give to those around you and to your communities is to live truthfully into your own authentic power. And so that's my wish for all of our women in our community.
Thank you.
And I'll just land with us remembering to just highlight women just in general on a continuum, like we said, even beyond March. So I encourage people to come to our TRHT Kalamazoo page, TRHT community page, and just highlight women, period. Support women-owned businesses. Remember that people also, I mentioned, need to see what they can be in those non-traditional roles of which I was in. I was thinking about this with your questions, but we had a lady come to the house in the past year. She was dispatched from Roto-Rooter, a plumber. But our electricians, we have a pilot from Kalamazoo. Shout out to Monique Grayson, veterinarians, building contractors, just those areas where we're not used to seeing women also. Let's lift that so it can be a potential aspiration for our girls or people looking to change fields, et cetera, et cetera. Let's just celebrate, period. Every day, everybody could pour in. It's not on any individual to just do that work. Let's celebrate each other. Girl power.
Yeah, that this has been fun, informative, and I wish my mama could have caught this, but I'll make sure she catches it on the. Yeah, thank you all for sharing, for being brave, for the work, just everything. Just thank you. I learned a lot today, and I want to have a part two. I just got to figure out how to do it. So, Captain, we'll talk about something and circle this back. So, thank you all again. Peace.